Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. Tonight's guests are Garrett and Maya Miller. Garrett and Maya, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Vic.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for coming on. We appreciate your time. Garrett, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, both my sister and I, we grew up in Colorado almost our entire lives. We've been camping all over the place. We live in the mountains of Colorado, so we've definitely seen a lot of wildlife of all different kinds up here. I myself lived in Texas also for a few years, so I've seen a lot of that part of the country too. It's pretty standard growing up in the mountains of Colorado up here for us, at least.
Living in the mountains of Colorado, the way you just mentioned that you guys do, has that been changed greatly now that you had that encounter, or is it business as usual?
I would say it's changed a little bit. I'm a little more hesitant when I walk around at night for sure. Even though I haven't really read of many encounters specifically here in the mountains, just the vast geographical layout of the different encounters and sightings that people have had lead me to believe that they're all over the country. And why would they not be here in the mountains of all places where it's a much lower population density and easier for them to hide? So, I'm not terribly changed by it, but it still makes me look over my shoulder a little bit more each night when I walk around.
I agree with that statement. Definitely don't feel the same way I did before. I'm definitely much more hesitant when I'm outside, especially at night when I'm by myself, looking over my shoulder a lot more than I was before.
Maya, do you see it as a curse that you now know dogmen are out there, or maybe an advantage because you can take certain precautions?
I would probably not consider it a curse, more of an advantage, knowing that there are things out there like that, but I can take myself out of that by being careful as opposed to just being unaware of everything.
How about you, Garrett? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say it's a curse by any means. It's pretty cool to know that stuff like that really is out there, that sightings that other people have had may actually be genuine. I never really used to think about that too much. To me, I always thought it was a bunch of crazy yahoos looking for attention, or people who saw something weird and just chalked it up to a dog man or something. But yeah, it really opens my eyes to the possibilities of the things that are out there that science hasn't quite come to accept as a reality necessarily. Or prove, yeah.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of things that they poo-poo that they're wrong about, so as you found out about the hard way. Maya, Garrett just told us his thoughts on the matter, but what were your thoughts on the existence of cryptids like Sasquatch before you had that encounter?
I never denied that they were real, but I never felt like I had evidence to be able to prove that they did exist or did not exist, and I'm definitely someone who always thinks something can be out there, and now that I've seen it, it makes me absolutely think that a lot of other things are real that have been not necessarily proven as well, like Sasquatch or maybe even stuff like vampires or whatever.
Yeah, well, it is a lot to wrap your head around.
Absolutely.
Garrett, you just told us that you were a skeptic before you had your encounter with that dog man, but now that you've had that encounter, what are your thoughts on the existence of Sasquatch, considering the fact that you still haven't seen one?
It's kind of funny. I'm still at least a little bit in the skeptic camp because I can't vouch for anybody's evidence other than my own personally. But it really does, open up that possibility that there have to be things out there that science hasn't agreed to. The concept of rogue waves on the ocean were long thought to be sailors' tall tales until they scientifically recorded them. What was it, like 15 years ago, I think? And that's my kind of answer to a lot of scientists who say, well, there's no evidence or no real proof. I'm like, there's all sorts of stories and stuff. And yeah, maybe some of them fall into ghost stories. Maybe some fall into actual encounters. But especially with Sasquatch in particular, I'm a lot more open to the idea that they could be all over the place and we would never really know it.
Well, unfortunately, they are. Well,
right.
Most people don't know it. Garrett, when you hear other skeptics try to shoot down the existence of dogmen, does that make you angry now that you had that encounter, or do you laugh at how ridiculous their opinions are?
It's kind of funny. There may be a part of me that kind of wants to be like, don't laugh at me. But at the same time, I was in the same boat, so to speak, that those people, potential people, would have been in themselves, where I would be skeptic of anyone that had told me of their encounter. I would still probably believe them depending on who it was. But, it's one of those, I don't blame them for being skeptical, because for some reason these dogmen are very elusive, and how they've avoided actual scientific evidence, or at least something close, pictures and video that are clear quality, how they've avoided that for so long when much of the rest of the world really hasn't. I don't blame the people who would be very skeptical of that, because it's very understandable. Absolutely.
Well, like I said before, it is a lot to wrap your head around. Unless you've seen one, or unless you've looked into the phenomenon, it is pretty hard to believe in their existence. So that makes sense. Garrett, you told me that you haven't had too much trouble dealing with your encounter, but what do you attribute that to?
It's tough to say. It was really kind of weird the first couple of days. It kind of threw us off. I had a hard time not thinking about it consistently almost every day. But just the fact maybe that they are so elusive, and that, we spoke to you before about some people getting attacked. I had never really heard of any stories of other people getting attacked before that. So it was kind of like, I'm much more likely to fear a bear attack or a mountain lion attack, especially where we live. And so the occurrence of what happened, it just seems so rare that it really doesn't seem like there would be too much for me to fear. Like I said, especially here in the mountains of Colorado, there's so many more common things to be worried about, that the odds of running into another dogman seem pretty small, but you never know.
That's true. You never know. You just might have another encounter. I hope you don't, but as you know, it's possible. How about you, Maya? How much or how little trouble have you had dealing with that encounter?
I haven't felt like I've had any trouble really with it. It has definitely been on my mind. Like Garrett said, I could not stop thinking about it. We were looking up all kinds of things about it to try to find out any kind of thing that would just help us understand what we had seen. And it wasn't, I don't think I'm afraid or scared or anything. And I think it's just better. I don't know. I don't really know. It's still an odd feeling, like, to think about it. And it does seem like it would be extremely rare to encounter another dogman, and if I did encounter one, to feel like it would attack me. But you never really know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those lottery kind of things. If it happens, it happens, but otherwise there's such a small chance.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of neat that I got to see a dogman, as opposed to worrying about it happening again.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it goes without saying, I'm elated to hear that you two are dealing with that encounter in such a healthy way. That's great to hear. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of your encounter, please tell us about the place where it happened.
You could almost literally call it the middle of nowhere. It almost is geographically the dead center of the state of Texas. Anyone who's driven through there knows it's a pretty sparsely populated area. There's a lot of towns, but they're all relatively small. We were just a few miles south of I-20, maybe, 5 or 6, 7 miles south of I-20. Middle of the night, 3:30, 3:15, something like that in the morning.
Outside of Sweetwater?
Outside of a town called Sweetwater. We hadn't seen a car or another group of people or anything in forever.
We were on a road trip.
And yeah, being on a road trip, and yeah, there was nothing going on outside until our encounter. It was very, very remote area for sure.
In the dead of the night.
Great. Fun. That makes it even more exciting, huh?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say. All right, guys, please tell us all about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
All right. So, we were on a road trip from the mountains here of Colorado down to visit our dad and some other family in Copperas Cove, Texas, which is by Fort Hood in the Killeen area. And we'd left probably, 2 or 3 p.m. on earlier that day. We drove straight down I-25 to New Mexico and then into the panhandle of Texas, down through Amarillo, and kind of just straight south there down to, I can't think of the town all of a sudden. But, oh man, I really can't think of it.
All I know is that Sweetwater is where we decided to switch drivers, and you started driving.
Yeah, that's true. My sister had been driving up until that point, and she was getting tired.
It was like 3:30 in the morning, I think?
Yeah, 3:15, 3:30, I think. And we swapped drivers and started driving, and we're headed south on this tiny little road out of this town called Sweetwater, and pitch black out. And I'm looking at my phone to see where the next turn is that we have to take. And just when I think I've got it, I hear my sister go, "Oh my God, what is that?" And, I look up to the right side of the road and we see this very furry black creature running on all fours towards us. Very large, yeah. And it wasn't running elegantly like you would expect a feline to, or a deer or something like that. It was kind of an awkward lumbering like a bear does. And the shoulders right behind the head were massive, and even on all fours, slightly off to the side of this road, its shoulders were at least 5 feet tall, roughly, the height of my sister's truck hood. And it was immediately like, what is that? Like, we couldn't process what we were seeing. And the first thing I really noticed after the general shape were the very large eyes, 3 to 4 inches in diameter easily, and just the most deep yellow I've ever seen in my life. Bright yellow, yeah. And it's running at us on all fours and kind of like parallel to our direction, but except the opposite way. And right as we're going past it, about 80 miles an hour, we start to see that it's got, very muscular upper body, the shoulders, the deltoids,
and the arms. They were like,
and the arms,
like it was on steroids. Very, very muscular, jacked. Even through the fur, you could tell that it was very muscular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very muscular. It seemed to taper off towards the waist a little bit. I didn't really get a good look at the hands or the feet myself. We noticed a big bushy tail on it.
And the shoulders were like a little higher than the head, and the head was kind of like a giant triangle shape, almost like the size, like a bear size, but bigger. Like the biggest head I think I've ever seen, with these massive eyes. And then the muscles you could see through its mangy, matted hair. It kind of looked like a Muppet animal for the hair.
Yeah, it had real kind of stringy, almost dreadlock kind of hair coming off it at points. That some of these dreadlock-like strands they had to be 7 or 8 inches long, really very oddly long. And, again, like she said, the head was very large. We couldn't decide if it was more bear-like or dog-like from what we saw just in that small span, but it was really odd that we both kind of looked at each other and was like, what could that have possibly been?
But as we passed it, it went from lumbering on all fours, and stopped and started to stand on its hind legs as we drove past. But we were going 80 with the cruise control set, so it wasn't the longest amount of time that we got to look at it.
Yeah, probably 10 seconds or less.
And we had the high beams on, so we could totally see it, and there was nothing on the side of the highway. It was completely manicured highway, no bushes or trees or anything for it to kind of be hiding behind, so we got a clear look at it, and it was definitely the biggest, creepiest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, the eyes alone, Vic, I will never forget those eyes as long as I live. They just had such a piercing feel to them. And the odd thing was that we both realized was that they didn't have that flat eye glow that almost all animals on this earth have.
Like the reflection when the light reflects off of the eye.
Yeah, because normally anyone who's seen animal eyes at night in the headlights, you see the glow of the eye, but you don't see any detail behind that glow. It's just a flat glow. You don't see pupil or anything like that. And the whole time that this thing was running at us, and when we drove by, you could see the clear as day pupils, and they were very large. They were kind of horizontally slitted, but kind of in a round pill shape on both ends. It was a very odd eye. And the weird thing is that the eyes were just as bright in her headlights as they were in the pitch black on the side of the highway as we drove past. I mean, the exact same brightness, and I've never seen animal eyes do that. It was almost like there was a glow coming from within the eye itself. And that, I think, was what really gave me such a very unsettled feeling, something that really creeped me out, because that was just so unnatural. And the way it looked at us as we drove by, it was clearly seeming to make eye contact with us. Yeah. We both felt like we had looked it right in the eyes.
It looked like it looked through our headlights directly at us. And I don't know how you would look through high beams of a vehicle into someone's eyes, but it looked like it made eye contact. Like it felt like it.
Mm-hmm. And even as we drove by, it was looking into the cab of the truck and not at the headlights or the back of the truck or anything. Like when we drove by it, like right next to it, it was probably 3-4 feet outside of your door at most. And it was looking straight at us inside the cab. And that was probably the creepiest feeling of all, was that you just got a sense that this thing had some intelligence to it, that it knew that it was seeing a vehicle and that there were people inside that vehicle, and it was trying to get a good look at us. And it felt like.
The first thing I felt after we drove away was that I felt like we weren't supposed to see that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had this pit feeling like in my gut that was like, you weren't supposed to see that. And Garrett was saying that he couldn't drive fast enough away from it, and that if we got to a dead end, he was going to peel out so fast because we were worried at what we just saw.
Because, yeah, it definitely had kind of a, if not evil, at least a malevolent kind of feel to it.
Demonic or something. I don't know. It felt evil.
It felt like it definitely wanted to harm us. Like, we both agreed on that fact almost immediately, that we couldn't. There were so many weird things about it that we couldn't place. Was that a bear? No, that couldn't have been. Was that a coyote? No way. Was it a panther? Yeah.
Boar?
Wasn't a boar? Yeah. And it was like, what was that? And it was like, well, all we know is that thing was wanting to get at us. It felt like, and I had never really felt a feeling like that before from an animal like that. It was very unsettling feeling, and we just drove as fast as we could away from that area. And we missed our next 3 left turns that we were supposed to make because we were so afraid. And,
didn't want to slow down.
Yeah, we certainly didn't want to slow down.
When we drove by it, we were going 80, and it probably looked like it was running at least 30 miles an hour on all fours. It was going super fast looking.
Yeah. And it didn't even look like it was putting that much effort into running, as in it probably could have run a lot faster if it really wanted to. And so we just were, let's get out of here. I don't even care if we miss our next few turns. We eventually need to make a left turn, but it was like, we're certainly not slowing down, let alone turning around to go take a turn that we just missed. So it was like, let's just worry about getting out of here first. And then once we're far enough away, then we can kind of re-navigate to our destination. But it was a very, very odd encounter. And like Maya said, I had not been able to stop thinking about it over the last couple of weeks.
A little unsettling.
Yeah, definitely unsettling. And to think that there are things like that all across the country, it's a very odd feeling.
Yeah, definitely odd. That's quite the understatement there. Maya, you said it had the biggest head you've ever seen. Was its head still in proportion to its body, though, or was its head size proportionate?
I would say the head looked proportionate to how big the upper body looked. I couldn't really tell how the hind legs were, but like the upper body, the chest, the shoulders, the arms were so big and muscular that the head seemed proportionate to it. It was just a little down from the shoulders when it was on all fours. But I couldn't really tell for the back of the body. But it was still much larger than like a big bear head or a big wolf head. Or
yeah, to fit those size eyes, the 3 to 4 inches in diameter, next to each other and still have a head, it had to be at least 14 to 17 inches, I would say, in diameter. Good foot, almost foot and a half.
It reminded me kind of like the Beauty and the Beast, how big the beast head was.
It did, didn't it? I didn't even think of that.
Wow, that is big.
Yeah.
You said it looked to be almost 5 feet tall at the shoulder. How tall do you think it would have been if it would have stood up onto its back 2 legs, Garrett?
Oh my gosh.
Right?
7.5 at minimum to, yeah, upwards of 9. I mean, and the weird thing is that its front legs seemed longer, because didn't it seem like the back sloped off downward kind of as it ran towards us? And so, yeah, if it stood up, I would say, yeah, minimum 7.5 to like 9 feet, possibly. It was huge.
Well, yeah, if it was 5 feet at the shoulder or down on all fours, it had to have been at least 9 feet on 2 legs, but I guess all we can do is guess on that. So that I'm clear on this, you did say that it had canine-style legs, correct?
That's what it seemed like. I mean, we didn't really get the greatest look at especially the back legs, but they did seem kind of canine, and especially when we drove past it, when it came up on its hind legs, obviously its front legs were off the ground. What do you think?
But the front legs, I would say the front legs were kind of like between a bear and canine, because it wasn't like the way it was running on all fours, it wasn't running like a canine. It was a little different on the front legs, but it was not exactly like a bear. So that's why it's hard to
especially because there seemed to be no bears in that part of Texas anyway.
But the back legs, definitely the way it was running, seemed to move more like canine legs.
I would say so too, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's an image that you're never going to be able to get out of your heads, and understandably so.
Yeah.
You told us how its pupils were horizontal slits. Have you ever taken a good look at goat eyes? And if you have, how did a goat's eye compare to its eye?
It's funny you say that, because when I was looking up various kinds of animal eyes, color, size, types of slitting, the closest I saw, you're right, was the goat eyes that were horizontally slitted, but they weren't like the snake eyes that have the narrow points on the end. They were very rounded, kind of in a sideways pill shape. And you're right, the goat has got the closest eye I've seen.
Octopus does too.
Or octopus. I think octopi, yeah, definitely have those too. But yeah, it was the goat eye that really stood out. But none of the goat eyes were big enough, clearly, for it to be like that. I mean, those eyes are larger than any animal eyes that are scientifically recorded on Earth, except for like the giant squid, or at least land animals, the ostrich and the horse. Their eyes are like 2 inches in diameter, and these were way larger than that for sure.
Yeah, that's saying a lot. As I'm sure you know, ostriches and horses, they've got the 2 biggest eyes of any land animal. So, yeah, that is saying quite a bit. Garrett, you said its face freaked you out. What was it about its face that freaked you out so much?
Mostly the eyes. They held my attention so much that almost a lot of the rest of the detail just was kind of superfluous, secondary at best. I mean, it was almost hypnotic the way I just kind of looked into the eyes, and that was almost all I could see. I didn't really get much of a look at a snout. I certainly didn't see any teeth or anything. But yeah, just the eyes alone, really haunting is probably the best way I can describe them. It really kind of, in a sense, pierced my soul and made me go, oh my God, what is that? And why is it looking at me like that? It was a very, very unsettling feeling easily.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm not sure if you two realize this or not, but yeah, you're mentioning the horizontal slit eyes. This is the first time I've ever heard that from a Dogman eyewitness.
Interesting.
I personally didn't see the pupils. I was too worried about everything else, I think.
I think because it was like 3 feet outside your door by the time we drove by, which is unbelievably close. Yeah, I would have been a little freaked out about that
most
too.
of the photos I've seen or drawings I've seen, they have like big pointy ears, and I couldn't tell you at all what its ears looked like.
Yeah, I didn't really notice any ears either myself. Like I said, I was so fixated on the eyes.
Yeah, 3 feet away from your window. That's way too close for comfort.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I said, "What is that?" with a few extra words over and over and over for like 10 minutes.
I think so, yeah. A few choice words easily.
Yeah.
Okay, Maya, come off of it. What were those extra words? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. What feature was it that freaked you out most, Maya?
I think just the whole thing in general, I think. The eyes were definitely piercing to me, but I think just watching it run towards us at that speed was the thing that scared me the most, because Garrett was, I think, glancing down at his phone as soon as I saw it, because he was trying to check the next turn, and so fast, I mean, it was like, I don't know what this giant thing running after me is. And if I was by myself, I really think I would question if I actually saw it or not.
Well, that wouldn't make you any different from a lot of eyewitnesses. Like I said earlier, it is a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned how it was running towards you. Do you have any opinions on why it was doing that?
I'm not really sure. He was just running down the side of the highway. So, I mean, potentially he was going to look for food or water or traveling somewhere. I don't know, because I mean, he wasn't going slow. He was going at a fast pace. So to me, it seems like he was trying to get somewhere or get something, but it didn't seem like he was coming towards us. It just happened to be that we passed him while he was running on that part of the road. Or whatever it is.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you if there's any possibility in your minds that maybe it was just doing what it was doing. It was running down the road, and then you just happened to come by, and it seemed like it was running at you.
Yeah, I kind of think he was just doing his own thing, and we happened to pass him, but he was going very fast.
But yeah, we definitely caught him by surprise, I would say.
Yeah, that's what it kind of... I think we all caught each other by surprise.
Yeah, sounds like it. And if that's the case, that's a lot better, and it's a lot different than if that dog man saw you and just started running at you, so.
Yeah, I think I would have possibly had a heart attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, understandably so. You said that it watched you drive by, and after you had passed, it stood up onto its back legs. Did you seem to have any trouble doing that, or was it almost effortless?
It seemed effortless from my point of view. I mean, it wasn't an immediate kind of thought that that's what it was. It was more in the hours afterward. We kind of realized, like, the way that upper body turned to follow us as we drove by, and the way the upper body was looking right in our window, means it had to have come up on its hind legs to turn and follow us with its torso. And that wasn't really something, like I said, that we thought at the moment. It was more a realization we made later. Like, the only way the torso could have followed us at that speed was for it to come up on its hind legs. And I would say, yeah, it was a pretty effortless thing for it to do that.
Yeah, it seemed like he did it right as we were passing. He was running and slowed down enough to be able to stand up and turn and watch us. Very easy, like effortless, as you say.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad he waited until you had gone past to stand up like that. When they stand up onto their back legs, yeah, that definitely adds a whole new creep factor to having an encounter with one.
I can only imagine. Gosh.
We could have crashed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you definitely could have. I'm sure when he stood up that he wasn't next to any signs or trees or anything like that that you could use as a metric to get an idea on how tall he was. You said you thought he might have been 7, maybe 9 feet tall. We couldn't be that lucky where he did stand next to a sign or anything, did he?
No.
I didn't see any
All
signs.
I remember was when I looked out your window, his eyes were in the top part of the window from my point of view.
My truck's a Toyota Tacoma. And I felt like when he was on all fours driving past, he was the height of my hood on all fours. But I personally couldn't have seen how tall he was when we passed him against anything else.
Yeah, I don't think he stood up on his, like, fully erect on his hind legs. I think it was more kind of a hunched over or hunched over rather on his hind legs, but still front legs up. But still, when we drove by, what's the top of the Cabbier truck? Like 7 feet, 6.5 feet?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
Something
yeah.
like that.
The eyes were almost to the top of her passenger window when we drove by from my point of view, and that has to be a good 7 feet off the ground, and that was,
Not fully erect.
yeah, not fully stood up. He was still hunched over a little bit.
Yeah, they normally do have that pronounced hunch, so that all makes sense. Has anything happened since you two had that encounter that leads you to believe that you might have had another Dogman encounter?
Not that I can think of.
No, the only thing I've had is a video show up that a Sasquatch was spotted in Washington.
Yeah, I've certainly read a lot of Dogman encounters, and it's nice to see such common features that other people describe, especially when it's far away. It wasn't like everyone in the same area of Texas. It's, from Maine and from Michigan and from Montana, a lot of M states apparently, Florida even, that they described so many of the same features, and it was just like, it was very rewarding in a sense to be like, maybe we really weren't hallucinating something. We really saw something that is real, but as science considers it, not real so far.
No, you definitely saw what you saw. You're obviously handling the encounter well now, but did either of you ever struggle to deal with it?
Me personally, the first couple nights, like we kind of said, it was hard to stop thinking about it. And I definitely say the first 3 nights after it happened, I was really, really paranoid to walk outside at night, even with a group of people, but especially by myself. That's kind of faded a little bit, although there's been a few nights where I've had, I wouldn't go so far as to call them nightmares, but definitely spooky dreams where there's some sort of large creature stalking me. And even once in one of the dreams, I did notice a Dogman shape. But beyond that, not too much. What about you, Maya?
I don't really feel like I've had too many issues. I think the first 2 nights you said you felt like it could have possibly followed us. That was the only thing I felt like you had mentioned. But I don't really feel like it's bothered me at all. I just think about it a lot, but not in a way that keeps me from moving on with my life or sleeping, which is good.
Yeah.
Well, like I said before, I'm so glad to hear that you're dealing with that experience in such a healthy way. So that's great. Well, it goes without saying that you two are dealing with your encounter a lot better than most eyewitnesses do. Since you're dealing with your experience so well, what advice would you give eyewitnesses who aren't coping with theirs very well?
I don't know.
That's a tough question. Almost just the fact that there don't seem to be too many recorded attacks. You told us of some, but other than having you told us, I had never, finding encounters that people have written, kind of rare. Finding encounters of attacks seemed even more rare. Just, I think, and the common thread that we talked about before is that if they have a purpose, in a sense, these creatures, it's more to just instill fear in the people that witness them, that they're not necessarily there to kill, let alone eat you or anything. They're just there to, and why they would have a purpose to instill fear is such an odd thought to me. But that seems to be the common thread I found in a lot of those encounters I read, was that the Dogman almost knew that the people were watching them, kind of almost posing and saying, yeah, I'm here. And, kind of making you question your reality a little bit, but really not out there to get anybody, not out there to attack or take anybody or anything like that. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of Mother Nature commanding you to respect her in a sense. I don't know. It's tough to say.
I'm wondering too if, since I have talked to so many people about it, I pretty much have told everybody in my family and all my friends and coworkers. I'm wondering if, since I have talked about it so much, maybe that's helped me out with it and helped me to be able to just deal and cope a little better. I'm not really 100% sure, but maybe that's something that can help these people, as opposed to like keeping it inside and worrying that people are going to think they're crazy for saying something like this. Just talk about it, because otherwise we're never going to learn more about it.
That's true. I'm glad that you're so open about the experience. And speaking of that, you just told us about all the people who you've shared your experience with, Maya. What kind of responses did you get when you did that?
Well, my dad was the first person I told, and he lives in Texas, and he was almost seemed ecstatic. We showed up to our family reunion, and he actually told the whole family, guess what my kids saw? And then he told us to tell everybody, and there was a lot of people at this family reunion, and everyone kind of seemed to be intrigued and have all kinds of questions that they thought, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, but we all talked about it, and I had a few laughs and snickers, but for the most part, people were interested and intrigued about it and thought it was really cool. And so I feel like I've been able to talk and think about it more since people have been so open about it.
I like the way you think. How about you, Garrett? How many people have you told about your experience?
Kind of same as Maya, you know, definitely the family around, a lot of my friends, roommates, coworkers. I haven't just gone out and told, you know, just everybody, because it's one of those, I already know that there's going to be, oh, well, you couldn't have seen it or this, but a lot of people I've gone out and told no problem. And just, I think it's kind of crazy because a lot of people, you know, you hear the stories of someone else who knew someone else who knew someone else who had a sighting like this, but very few people know somebody who directly had a sighting. So a lot of the people I've told are, like Maya said, very intrigued and ask a lot of questions. And, well, maybe it was this. And then we're like, well, it couldn't have been because, you know, this or something like that. And I've really gotten a pretty good response from most people I know. A lot of people have asked me for my little typed encounter that I initially sent you so they could read it to their friends about what the encounter was. And they all said it was very intriguing to read, that it was something that made them themselves question what's out there in a new way. And, yeah, I've gotten a pretty good response from most people on this. I haven't really had any negative responses.
Yeah, that's great to hear too. It sounds to me like you two have surrounded yourself with a group of really good friends and you have good family around you. That's great.
Definitely good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd say it is. After having your encounter, are you more focused on the world being a more exciting place, Maya, now that you know dogmen are out there, or do you focus more on the world being a more frightening place?
I'd say a more exciting place, because just shows there's so many things that we haven't discovered or proven, and how many things that we can still learn about. I mean, we don't even know about our own ocean, let alone these dogmen that are living in our
backyard,
and barely anybody's even seen them, let alone people don't think they're real. So I think it's interesting. I'm also a biology nerd, so for me it's one of those things that's really cool.
How about you, Garrett? What's your take on that?
Like Maya said, it's an exciting idea. There is, you know, a little bit of fear that goes with that of, you know, how many times have I been in the woods and maybe one of these dogmen was around me or possibly stalking me or something. There's definitely a small sense of fear, but definitely the wonder and the amazement, I think, are much more, because it really does make me wonder, you know, granting that these things really are real and that everyone has seen them, where have they come from and why have they avoided, you know, scientific studies so well compared to any other species on this planet, especially something so large? Is it truly a product of evolution and natural selection, and somehow they just have managed to avoid any scientific study or even solid proof that the world at large will accept? Are they, I don't know, it kind of sounds a little weird. Are they things from another dimension, or are they angels, demons, you know, something like that, aliens? I mean, there's so many odd explanations for what these creatures could be and why they're here and where they've come from. Are they part of our natural Earth, or are they something separate and of their own? It makes me think of how much stuff really is out there that we have no clue even exists. What kind of stuff are we going to learn about in the future?
Yeah, it is a pretty unnerving thought, no denying that. You just brought up their origins, Garrett. If you had to guess, where do you think they really came from?
Man, I think that's kind of what's captured my thought process in them, especially the last 2 weeks or so, is really what their origins are. If, there's some sort of divergence from the canines that evolved in some time in the past, but then why would they have such humanoid features? It's made me wonder, especially when we were talking earlier with the sense of dread and malevolence that we felt, that maybe these really are evil spirits, possibly, as, strange as that might be. I've read the stories of the Native American skinwalkers, that there are Native Americans who made, quote, deals with the devil so that they could turn into animals, wolf creatures being one of the big types.
There's also like the dogmen of like the ancient civilizations that are all around the world, and talked about dogmen living up to like 200 years old. They could possibly be something from those.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my sister did some research. People in India, they have a mythology, roughly speaking, of dogmen-like tribes living in different parts of India that were very peaceful-like, that they didn't have any malevolence towards humans. Then there's the old
but everyone wanted
Anubis.
To kill them.
Yeah, the natural fear of humans wants us to kill things we don't understand. There's stories going back through our history of Dogman or Wolfman or something like humanoids out there, and that makes me wonder, they really have been part of our history for so long, possibly, but why are they ignored? Why are they, I don't know, why does the world at large still not acknowledge them? And it's because I think they're just so elusive that it's so rare for any real proof to come out about their existence.
Yeah,
and that's odd to me.
Stay under the radar.
Yeah.
Maya, Garrett just told us about the research you've put into this. Where do you think they come from?
I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I don't have a set idea of where I think they're from, but I have a lot of ideas, and they're pretty much a lot of what Garrett could have said. They could have been on this planet forever and just been a different part of or a divergence of the canids, or maybe some crazy alien hybrid, something like, I don't know. I do love the Ancient Aliens show, and it makes me think about alien, dogman, humanoid hybrid things. So there's so many, my brain just goes all over the place with it.
Yeah, with all the information out there, it really is hard to understand where they do come from. All we can do is guess at this point. But having said that, it's about time for us to get out of here. But before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share? Garrett, please go first.
We've talked about how, as frightening as it was, it would still be very amazing to possibly have another encounter. From a lot of the encounters I read from other people, it was a one-time thing in their life, for the vast majority of them, usually a long time ago in the past, and that they were, quote, lucky or maybe unlucky enough to see one. To be honest, with my sense of wonderment that I found, I wouldn't mind seeing another. But like you said, be careful what you wish for. You never know what you're going to get. And I'm excited about what's in the world now to really see what's out there. But yeah, that's kind of it.
Definitely, it's a different world once you know the dogmen are out there. No denying that. How about you, Maya? Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
I think I just have to agree with Garrett that it does make the world even more interesting, and excited to see what else is out there. And I just wanted to thank you for having us on your show, because we got to talk about so many neat things with someone who's got so much experience with this. So it's really cool to talk to someone who can answer questions for us.
Absolutely.
Well, that goes two ways. It's been great talking with you. Having said that, guys, I want to thank you both so much for your time, for coming on and letting us know about that experience. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Vic. Thank you for having us on again. That was cool.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.